Okay, let's unpack this. We're taking a deep dive into chapter 14 of Isaiah. This text is, well, it's packed with some really intense imagery and powerful declarations about divine purpose, the fate of nations. Our mission here is to sort of explore the layers of this ancient oracle, pulling out the key threads from the source material to really understand what it's saying.
It really is a chapter of dramatic contrasts and reversals.
Yeah.
You start with this profound promise of hope and restoration, and then you just plunge into one of the most, well, scathing taunts in the entire prophetic literature, and then it broadens out again to declare the unwavering nature of God's plan for the whole world. It's quite a ride.
Right at the beginning, the chapter opens with this incredible promise, verses 1 through 3. It speaks directly to the future of Israel, or Jacob, as it says.
Exactly. The source material starts by saying, the Lord will have compassion on Jacob and will again choose Israel. So it's a clear affirmation of their relationship, their future, and part of that choosing is physical return, and will settle them in their own land.
Hmm.
You know, after periods of displacement or exile, this is a powerful word of hope. They're actually coming home.
But it's not just about Israel alone, is it? There's a really interesting detail here about who comes back with them or maybe joins them later.
Yes, that's a fascinating element. It kind of expands the scope of the restoration. The text mentions aliens will join them and unite with the house of Jacob. Now, who these aliens are, that's been debated, but the point seems to be inclusion. Yeah. Others will be drawn into this restored community.
And the power dynamic shifts completely. I mean, the text says, nations will take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess nations as servants and maidservants in the Lord's land. That's wow.
Yeah, think about the context. This was likely written in Israel, often found itself subservient to these larger empires. So this isn't just a return, it's a complete reversal of fortunes. Those who once held them captive will now facilitate their return. And Israel will rule over those who previously oppressed them. The text puts it very starkly. They will make captives of their captors and rule over their oppressors.
That is a dramatic turnaround. And the source material connects this promise explicitly to a specific feeling for the listener, doesn't it? And on that day, the Lord gives you relief from your suffering and turmoil and cruel bondage. You can almost feel the weight being lifted just hearing that.
Absolutely. It really sets the stage. It establishes the context of suffering and then the promise of profound relief and restoration. And this relief, this liberation from bondage, it's the moment from which the next section just springs.
Because immediately after that promise of relief, the text pivots dramatically. It introduces the central focus of the chapter, taking up a taunt against the king of Babylon.
Right. This is where the language shifts from, comfort and promise to biting satire and judgment. The taunt is presented as something sung or recited on that day of Israel's relief. It's like the victorious song of the oppressed over their fallen oppressor.
And the taunt gets right to the point. How the oppressor has come to an end, how his fury is ended. Just like that.
The immediate focus is the end of his destructive power. And the text makes it clear this isn't accidental or just natural decline. The Lord has broken the rod of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers. These are classic symbols of authority, of power, right? But in this king's hand, they were instruments of wickedness, of oppression.
And the text doesn't just say he was a ruler, it describes the nature of his rule. Verses 5 and 6 are pretty clear. The one who struck down peoples in wrath with unceasing blows, who subdued nations in anger with relentless aggression.
Relentless, brutal, driven by fury. That portrayal makes the global reaction to his fall even more impactful. So what happens when this oppressive fury's ruler is finally gone?
The text says, all the lands are at rest and at peace. They break into singing. It's this picture of universal relief, like the whole world exhales.
Yeah, the entire world, seemingly held captive by his aggression, finally finds some respite. And the text uses this slightly personified, almost whimsical imagery to emphasize the scope of his impact and just how deep the relief is. Even the trees celebrate.
Yes, verse 8 is wonderful. The cypresses rejoice over you, the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were laid low, no woodcutter comes up against us. It shows how his power wasn't just, political. His destructive reach even hit the natural world, demanding resources, cutting down forests. His fall brings rest even to the trees.
It's such a powerful way to communicate total liberation from the political right down to the environmental, you could say. But the taunt doesn't stop there. It follows him beyond life down into the grave, into Sheol.
Okay, this is where the imagery gets really vivid and maybe a bit strange. The grave below, Sheol, is described as being all astir to meet you at your coming. Like Sheol itself is roused, actually anticipating his arrival.
And it's not just an empty waiting place. It rouses the spirits of the departed to greet you. All those who were leaders in the world. It makes kings rise from their thrones, all those who were kings over the nations.
Huh. Hmm.
Can you imagine that scene? All the great rulers of history, sitting there in their diminished state in Sheol, and they're getting up to receive this latest arrival.
And their greeting is just pure mockery, isn't it? They rise from their thrones only to say, "You also have become weak, as we are. You have become like us." Ouch.
That's the absolute core of the taunt in the grave. His entire identity was built on being uniquely powerful, above everyone else, shaking the earth. But down in Sheol, he's just another shade, stripped of all his exceptional status. He's simply like us.
And all the trappings of his earthly power are gone too, verse 11. All your pomp has been brought down to Sheol, along with the noise of your harps. Maggots are spread out beneath you, and worms cover you.
The contrast couldn't be starker, could it? From the glory and celebration implied by pomp and harps, which you'd associate with a royal court, to the grim reality of decay and humiliation, maggots and worms. His fall is total. It impacts his status even in the realm of the dead and his physical state.
Then comes maybe the most famous section, the "How you have fallen from heaven" passage in verse 12.
Yes, this section takes the taunt to a cosmic level. The king is addressed as, "O morning star, son of the dawn." This imagery links him to something incredibly high, bright, prominent in the sky. Maybe a reference to a deity associated with the morning star in ancient Near Eastern myths, or maybe just a metaphor for extreme prominence and brilliance. But this exalted figure has been cast down to the earth, the very one who previously laid low the nations.
And the text immediately tells us why, right? It details his own thoughts, his ambitions in verses 13 and 14. This wasn't just about conquering nations. It was about something much bigger.
Precisely. Cosmic usurpation, really. His ambition is laid out in this series of "I will" statements. I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the Mount of Assembly in the far reaches of the north. That Mount of Assembly, or sacred mountain, that's imagery often associated with the dwelling place of the gods, the divine council. He wasn't content with earthly rule. He wanted to sit in the place of ultimate divine authority.
His ultimate goal, stated baldly, was, "I will make myself like the Most High."
That's the height of hubris right there in the text. His ambition wasn't just to be a powerful king, it was to ascend to the level of the divine, essentially to become God. And this section immediately contrasts that massive aspiration with his actual reality.
Yeah, verse 15 brings him crashing right back down. But you were brought down to Sheol, to the depths of the pit. The ultimate rise he planned turns into the ultimate descent.
And those who witness his fall are just astonished. The text describes them staring at him, pondering his fate. They ask these questions that really highlight the immense power he once wielded. Is this the man who shook the earth, who made kingdoms tremble?
Who made the world a desert, who overthrew its cities, who did not let his captives go home. They remember his destructive power, his cruelty too, not letting captives return home. Their questioning just reinforces how shocking his downfall is for someone who is so utterly dominant.
And the taunt concludes with one final, devastating contrast. It's about his burial, or lack thereof, compared to other kings.
Verse 18, all the kings of the nations lie in glory, each in his own tomb. They got honorable burials, resting in state. It's a common mark of respect for royalty, even fallen royalty.
But this king, he's denied even that, verse 19. But you are cast out, away from your grave like a loathed branch, clothed with the slain, those pierced by the sword, who go down to the stones of the pit like a corpse trampled underfoot. He doesn't get a tomb. He's like discarded refuse, mixed with the bodies of common soldiers, treated like a trampled corpse.
And verse 20 explicitly states he will not join the others in burial. And it gives the reason. Because you have destroyed your land and slaughtered your people.
So his own actions, his tyranny, disqualified him from even the basic respect given to other fallen rulers. He's denied the peace of the grave because of the violence and destruction he caused. It's quite profound.
And the consequences go beyond just him. The text pronounces judgment on his lineage, his kids.
Right. The offspring of evildoers shall never be named. They won't rise to inherit the land or cover the earth with cities. Basically, his dynasty, his legacy is completely cut off. Done.
Finally, the Lord himself issues a direct declaration against Babylon, verses 22 and 23. This confirms the judgment is divine, not just, historical circumstance.
I will rise up against them, declares the Lord Almighty. He promises total eradication, name, survivors, offspring, descendants, all gone. And the imagery for Babylon itself is just desolate. I will make her a possession of the hedgehog and cover her with swamps, and I will sweep her with the broom of destruction, declares the Lord of hosts.
Wow. From a glorious empire to swampland for hedgehogs. Swept away with a broom. That's some image.
It is utter destruction.
So you have this incredibly detailed, almost blow-by-blow account of the fall of a single tyrannical king and his city. But the chapter doesn't end there, does it? It shifts again.
Yeah, it transitions to a broader declaration of God's ultimate sovereignty. Verse 24 pulls back from the specific example of Babylon to make a universal statement about divine purpose. The Lord of hosts has sworn, as I have planned, so shall it be, and as I have purposed, so shall it stand. It's this declaration of absolute certainty in God's intentions and his ability to carry them out.
And the text uses a specific historical action as an illustration, right?
Yeah.
Crushing the Assyrian in his land, trampling him on the mountains.
Exactly. And that action results in the removal of his yoke and burden from God's people. Just like the promised relief from the Babylonian king earlier, it links these specific acts of judgment and liberation to this larger divine plan. They're not random events.
And this isn't just about Israel or Babylon or Assyria. The text makes that clear. This is the plan determined for the whole world, and this is the hand stretched out over all the nations.
This is crucial, I think. The events described earlier, the fall of Babylon, the judgment on Assyria, they're presented not just as isolated incidents, but as demonstrations of a universal principle. God's plan encompasses all of history, all nations.
And the final statement in this section is that powerful rhetorical question in verse 27. For the Lord of hosts has purposed, and who will annul it? His hand is stretched out, and who will turn it back?
It just emphasizes the unchallengeable nature of divine will. If God has purposed something, no human power, no national power can stop it. It reinforces that the dramatic events described, like the fall of seemingly invincible empires, are all part of a larger, unstackable divine purpose.
Now, the chapter includes what feels like a distinct, shorter message tacked on at the end. Verses 28 through 32. It's introduced with a specific time marker, in the year that King Ahaz died. And this is an oracle concerning the Philistines.
Right. It's a message aimed at another nation that had a long, often contentious history with Israel. And the warning is immediate. Do not rejoice, all of you Philistia, that the rod that struck you is broken. For from the root of the serpent will come forth a viper, and its fruit will be a flying fiery serpent.
That snake imagery is pretty potent. It implies that maybe one oppressive power that hit the Philistines is gone, maybe Assyria, though it doesn't explicitly say, but a more dangerous, venomous threat is coming from the same source or lineage, a successor threat.
Exactly. And again, the text contrasts the fate of the nations. While the Philistine root will be destroyed by famine, its survivors slain. The poorest of his core will find pasture, and the needy will lie down in safety. This seems to refer back to the safety and security promised to Israel's most vulnerable in their restored land.
There's a call for mourning among the Philistine cities in verse 31. Wail, O gate, cry out, O city, melt in fear, O Philistia, all of you. And the threat is identified as coming from the north, described as a cloud of smoke, this unstoppable, disciplined force with no straggler in its ranks.
Yeah, that force from the north is often interpreted historically as referring to the Assyrians, or maybe later the Babylonians, depending on how you date the prophecy precisely. The point is, devastating judgment is coming for Philistia too.
And the chapter wraps up in verse 32 with the answer given to any envoys from that nation. It's a clear statement about where ultimate security lies amidst all this rise and fall of earthly powers.
What shall one answer the messengers of the nation? The Lord has founded Zion, and in her shall the afflicted of his people find refuge. So amidst the judgment on Babylon, Assyria, Philistia, the focus returns to God's people and their security. And that security is found not in politics or military might, but in Zion, the place God himself has established.
So looking back over this whole chapter, it's a really powerful journey, isn't it? You go from this promise of restoration for the afflicted through the absolutely astonishing, almost theatrical fall of a tyrannical empire and its king, that vivid humiliation in the grave, the declaration of God's unwavering purpose over all nations, and finally, the specific word of judgment against another historical adversary.
It really is. And what's fascinating here is how the text uses such varied and vivid language. You've got songs of relief, biting taunts, cosmic imagery of falling stars and divine ambition, lamentations, snake metaphors. All of it seems aimed at underscoring these core themes. the futility of human pride when it seeks ultimate power, the inevitable downfall when you set yourself against divine purpose,
Right.
and that stark contrast between the fate of the wicked oppressor and the secure refuge found in what God himself establishes for his afflicted people.
Yeah, it's not just reporting events, it's interpreting them through this deeply theological lens, isn't it? Showing the deeper reality behind the rise and fall of empires.
Exactly. It challenges us, I think, to look beyond just the immediate spectacle of power and collapse and see the operation of a larger, unthwartable purpose at work.
So, thinking about all this, what does it mean for you hearing this ancient text today? We've seen this incredible contrast presented all through chapter 14 of Isaiah. You have the king of Babylon seeking ultimate power and control, wanting to make himself like the Most High, and then his spectacular, humiliating fall, versus God's afflicted people finding their refuge in Zion, a place the text explicitly says the Lord has established for them.
Consider the implications of those two pathways, perhaps. One seeks ascent through conquest, through pride, and it ends in the deepest pit, denied even rest. The other finds safety, finds peace in a refuge established by a divine foundation, not by human striving.
So, what does this chapter suggest about where true safety and rest are ultimately found? Not just in ancient times, maybe, but in the patterns of power and vulnerability we still see playing out in the world today. Something to think about.